Welcome to the last Science Cafe of this spring 2014 season. This Science Cafe series is brought to you by the U of A College of Science and the Flandrau Science Center. I'm very pleased to welcome Robert Glennon. He's a Regents professor at the University of Arizona Law School and a Morris K. Udall Professor of Law and Public Policy. So can we have a big round of applause for Professor Robert Glennon?
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. When the folks at Flandrau asked me to do this on 4th Avenue, I was happy to do it. They asked if I would have any problem talking while people were eating and drinking and carousing, and I said, gosh, no, I'm a university professor. And really, in a way, you folks are pretty easy, because at the U of A Law School, all of our classrooms are wired, and that means that my students have access to the full range of the internet during class, and I mean the full range of the internet. So enjoy the pizza. There's one new noise that we're going to put up with tonight, and I'm pretty darn glad it's happened, and that's a streetcar. It's about time. Yeah. Now there's one more thing we have to do, and that's finally we have to close this street to cars. Yeah. That's the next step. Yeah, that's the next step. The streetcar is great, but my goodness, with those wide tracks, it's a death trap for cyclists. So let's just do the right thing and get the street closed. So my task tonight is to talk about water in the United States, and especially the crisis in water. And I'll start with a quote from one of our great founding fathers, Ben Franklin. When the well's dry, we know the worth of water. Great adage. But he was wrong. We Americans are spoiled. When we wake up in the morning, we turn on that tap, and out comes as much water as we want, or less than we pay for cell phone service or for cable television. When most of our fellow citizens think about water, they think about it as the air, infinite and inexhaustible, when for all practical purposes, it's very finite and very exhaustible. And the crisis is a bad one. Here's one of the most recent maps of the drought monitoring outfit at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln about what's going on in the United States. And those blood red colors, they don't come that way very often. And they cover the entire Colorado River region. The entire state of California tonight is in drought. The drought in Texas, oh my golly, that's been a tough one. That drought started in 2010, and it hasn't stopped. This is a photograph of the Cargill meatpacking plant in Plainview, Texas. Last year, they closed their doors and fired 2,200 workers. The whole population of the town is 23,000. This is a town about to blow away. When you think about the multiplier effects of losing that many jobs, the devastation on the communities that are involved. Here's a photograph of the High Sierra in the winter. You're not supposed to see the earth in the High Sierra in the middle of the winter. Last year was the worst drought on record, driest year ever in California. This year the snowpack was as low as 17%, bumped up a little bit. It's still so far below normal. This year, farmers in California are fallowing more than 500,000 acres of the best farmland on the planet because there's not enough water. Allocations from the state and the feds are 0%, 5%. It's tough. Losses in the economic in multiple billions, tens of billions. We in Arizona are affected by this slide. This is Lake Mead, the familiar backdrop. This lake has never been this low since it was first filled, and it's not going to get any better. The Bureau of Reclamation has said that within the next 2 years, both Arizona and Nevada may suffer shortages of water. They'll have to cut back the amount of water that we get out of the CAP. And one would think that people would respond aggressively and with a clear eye toward how serious the crisis is. But that's not the case at all. Instead, we have the hydro-illogical cycle. And that starts with drought. That's what we've got going on right now. And that makes you aware. And then there's concern, but finally panic. But the panic lasts only as long as the first soaking rain. And then you complete the hydro-illogical cycle with apathy. And that's what's happened all around the United States. In one way, what I'm talking about is not more complicated than supply and demand. All the water there is. You can't make any more. You can't destroy it. We're drinking the same water as the dinosaurs drank. But if that's true, why is there a water crisis? What's happened? What's happened is very simple. We humans have used water up in ways that are unsustainable. That water that's in the aquifers that took Mother Nature thousands of years to accumulate, we've been using up in mere decades. So the water isn't where we need it, when we need it, in the form that we need it. And that's why it really is supply and demand. And there are a lot of different demands on our water supply. Here's one. This is Kohler's power shower. It has 10 shower heads, each capable with enough water pressure to take the paint off walls. These are very popular in Scottsdale. That's why we in Tucson look down on Phoenicians. This one's Jennifer Aniston pimping for Glosso's Smart Water. I was the first 10 years ago to point the finger at bottled water. At this point, I don't think I need to make that case about it's 1,000 times more expensive, it's no safer than tap water. You know that now. 10 years ago, people didn't. Instead, I'll tell you this. If you have not seen the Penn and Teller skit from their Showtime cable show about bottled water, you must get it on YouTube. Because it shows a fancy California restaurant. But instead of a wine steward, there's a water steward, complete with the apron over the arm. And instead of a wine list, there's a water list. And patrons are selecting waters based on the Arctic flavors and glacier aftertaste. And they're swirling the water around in their glasses like it was a nice French Bordeaux. And then the clip shows Penn out in the backyard, filling the bottles from a hose. It may come as a surprise, but virtually every form of energy production takes a lot of water. For me, the poster child of this is ethanol. It's the new kid on the block. Now, I don't have a dog in the fight about whether ethanol is a good deal or a bad deal, whether it has a positive return on investment or not. Instead, I just like to flag the enormous water consumption associated with it, and to make the very basic point that U.S. energy policy has developed in utter disregard of the water implications of each source of energy. In the case of ethanol, it takes as much as 4 gallons of water to refine 1 gallon of ethanol. So a modest-sized plant producing 50 million gallons a year requires 200 million gallons. Now that's actually not so much water and not so bad if you're growing it here, where Mother Nature has normally provided enough rainfall to allow for dry land farming. But once you go past the 100th meridian, all of a sudden you're into the arid west. And there, you can't grow anything without irrigation water. And corn is a very water-intensive crop. It may take as much as 2,500 gallons of water to grow enough corn to refine 1 gallon of ethanol. Now, I don't know, it's above my pay scale with that many zeros to try to describe what it is. It was 4 times 1 times 2,500, oh yes, times 36 billion, which is the number of gallons of biofuels Congress says we should produce by 2022. It's an enormous amount of water, utterly and completely unsustainable. And the point I'd like to make next is that it takes, we now know, a lot of water to produce energy, but it also takes a lot of energy to move, pump, cleanse, and deliver water. Anyone know who the largest user of energy in Arizona is? Central Arizona Project and the Salt River Project behind it. But at least the SRP takes the water from the mountains and brings it down. And they've got plants along the way. We take it from down and bring it up. And that's why the CAP is such an enormous energy sink. Energy. Here's a new kind of energy. These are Google's server farms. Resemble no resemblance to McDonald's farm. They're computer data centers. So every time you use that smartphone, every time you do a Google search, every time you upload a video, you are asking someone to store that data someplace, and you're using energy to do it. And in this instance, Google needs tens of thousands of computers at each of these server farms, each generating heat, and it uses water to dissipate that heat. Water is a great coolant. We know that from our automobile radiators. But suddenly you think about clean, high-tech industry, and you realize that the soft underbelly is there really an industrial concern with enormous demands both for energy and for water. Who would have thought it? How big a deal is this? An enormous deal. There are now tens of thousands of data centers all around the country, all requiring about the same amount of energy as a decent-sized city. Just YouTube alone, 60 hours of video are uploaded every minute. You know those videos of your cat? Frankly, they're just not interesting. If you'd like to save water or save energy, don't put that video up. And even think about turning off the light. So what are we going to do about this thing? We've got a supply and demand problem. Well, there are real solutions, but there are also what I call surreal solutions. This first one, this is an actual billboard from the state of Michigan. It shows the Great Lakes and it shows all of us from the Southwest tapping into the water from the Great Lakes. I taught back there at several different schools, and whenever I'm back there, I put this up and I say, you people should be ashamed of yourselves. This is a scurrilous attack on those of us in the Southwest. We have no desire to divert all of the Great Lakes. You know, maybe just one of the smaller ones. So there are fools out there with surreal ideas of pumping water over mountains, under mountains, towing icebergs from the Arctic, diverting waters from British Columbia. They're nonsense. It's a fool's errand. That's not a solution. So where else can we go? Well, how about weather modification? Mark Twain. Everyone complains about the weather. No one ever does anything about it. Well, these guys are trying to do something about it. This is called cloud seeding. You throw some silver iodide out of a plane, or you explode it through a cannon up in the air, and basically you pray for rain. And what's stunning about this is the National Research Council has looked carefully at cloud seeding and said there's no proof it works. But all around the West, people are still throwing silver iodide out of planes. But I just ask you, as intelligent ladies and gentlemen, do you really want to trust your water supply to these two characters? So that's another folly, another surreal idea, cloud seeding. Well, one thing we can do is we can build more dams and divert more water from rivers. But you know, that's what we've historically done. And frankly, we're now tapped out. So many rivers are over-tapped. Some of them don't even reach the ocean. And you know that about the Colorado River, about the Rio Grande. Thousands of rivers around the United States just hammered from taking too much water out. That's not an option. Building dams, we are good at that in the United States. In the mid-20th century, oh my golly, And we have two agencies, the Bureau of Reclamation and the Army Corps of Engineers, especially though the Bureau. The entire mission of the Bureau is if it finds moving water, stop it. Stop it. Dam it. Control it. Use it. And they've done it. But there's none left. Where are you going to put up a dam that's not going to cost you a fortune, create enormous environmental problems, and have great political blowback? That era is over. In fact, we're now taking dams out. Thank goodness. From the Penobscot in Maine to the Klamath in Oregon, thousands of miles of free-flowing rivers are now there because the last 10 years we've removed so many dams. So people who say, well, we'll just put up more storage units, they're not thinking clearly. For one thing, putting up more storage on a river where there's not enough water in the river to begin with doesn't add more water to the river. We need to go beyond that. But one of the things we've done very well in Arizona is to pump groundwater. Oh, golly. We've pumped so much groundwater. You can see the color here. The Ogallala Aquifer is this one. That's the poster child. But look at how much water is being even pumped in the southeast. They haven't learned from us, nor is the upper Midwest. I was in Iowa last fall, where all these farmers are putting in new wells. Eastern Iowa, not the west of Iowa. Right. They're finding that if they can just tap off or top off what Mother Nature has provided, would be higher yields. Well, we know, of course, that the aquifers are plummeting because of this. We know that there are other environmental consequences. This one's from the San Joaquin Valley in California. You can see this is where the land surface was in 1925, and by 1977, that's what's happened to the Earth's surface. To this day, ladies and gentlemen, as we sit here this evening, California has virtually unregulated groundwater. They never did what Arizona sensibly did in 1980 with the Arizona Groundwater Management Act. You can just drill a well with impunity, and they are. It's so out of control in California during this drought right now that well drillers are so busy that a farmer in the San Joaquin Valley, in a news story last week, decided he'll buy his own drilling rig. I put $1 million up to buy a drill rig because he couldn't get a well driller to come drilling more wells. Well, I have this simple-minded idea about our water supply. It's like a giant milkshake glass. And each demand for water, each well, is a straw in the glass. And what California allows, and Arizona outside of the active management areas, and Nevada, and Nebraska, and so many Midwestern states, and even southeastern states like Georgia, limitless number of straws in the same glass. Well, that's the epitome of the tragedy of the commons. So my message is business as usual. More dams, more diversions, more wells is not going to get the job done. So what else can we do? Desalination. Well, actually, desalination is a viable option. We have the technology available to take the salt out of water. But it's not a silver bullet or a panacea. There are three real problems with desal. One, it's very expensive. The membranes are high-tech, costly, they're prone to fouling, they require frequent replacement, very costly. Second, enormous energy, because it's all done under high pressure, reverse osmosis. And that reinforces the water-energy connection. And the third thing is, it produces this salt residue. How do you get rid of it? It doesn't disappear. If you started with 100 units and you end up with 40 of potable water, you end up with 60 units left with 100% of the salt. And trying to dispose of that is very, very challenging. And I have to be candid with you about this. Desal is one of the cornerstones of an Arizona Department of Water Resources report released in January of this year. Desal in Arizona. Did someone forget to tell them that we don't live on the ocean? There is some brackish water in the West Valley of Phoenix, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about trying to bring a pipe from the Sea of Cortez in Mexico to Arizona, or something from the Pacific Ocean. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't Arizonans didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. But our public officials are not showing the kind of leadership we need. You could say, well, there is the CAP canal. Yes, there is. Its capacity is slightly under what our rights are. There's no room in that canal. We would have to build another CAP canal to bring this in. Who's minding the storm? Who on earth is proposing such an idiotic idea as desal for us? In other places, you can do it. California is doing some. Florida is doing some. Places where you can get rid of the water and you don't have high energy costs. But you have high energy costs anyway, and you're going to pump the water from the Sea of Cortez up 2,500 feet to get it to Tucson? And that was once okay, so long as we had the federal government paying for it. Right? I mean, we in Arizona think that the role of the federal government when it comes to water is to bring in wheelbarrows full of money and to drop them and to leave us alone because we are independent Westerners. This is not federal money. They ain't coming in, on the horse saying, here's another wheelbarrow. So we need more leadership. Still, if you have a high value use, few other options, desal will be part of the portfolio moving forward. How about reuse? Reuse is a big deal, and we know that we're doing that in Tucson. There's been a little bit of blowback about reuse, about the golden retriever. I'm not suggesting that you elbow Muffy out of the way. No, that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here to say we should be proud of what's going on in Tucson. We have a heck of a good utility in Tucson Water. 10% of the water that they provide is reclaimed water. Almost all of our golf courses are now reclaimed. We're using it for highway medians, for cemeteries, parks, ball fields. Google's starting to use it in light industrial applications, its server farms. It's a great source. Not a panacea either. As we know, you need purple pipes. They have to be separate from the potable system. Still, it's a resource as the community grows, and it's one that helps solve the problem. In some places, they're paying no attention to this. In California, LA has one of the largest treatment plants in the United States, the Hyperion plant. It produces a volume of water equal to the 7th largest river in the country. What do they do with it? They dump it in the Pacific Ocean. We can do better. We must do better. And finally, conservation. Now, I think Senator Feinstein is a gifted public servant. This was a really bad day for her. Just, a truly idiotic thing, This is California's idea of conservation. If they would just take a look at their lawns, they would basically solve the problem in Southern California. But they love lawns and rose bushes and azalea plants, even though they live in a desert. Right? LA, San Diego, they get 13 inches of rain a year. We in Tucson get 11 or 12. They're in a desert, we're in a desert. We live like we live in a desert. They live like they live in the Mediterranean. But we can be proud. We can be proud of water harvesting. This one's not from Tucson. This is from San Juan Island off of Seattle. The family there, their well, they were on an island in the middle of the ocean, and their well was having problems, so they decided to put in a water harvesting system. They collect water off the rooftop during the 4-month rainy season. They store it in the silo. They treat it, purify it. They are off the water grid. Here in Tucson, Brad Lancaster is the guru. He's really the national guru. We should be very proud of Brad and his pioneering work. Yeah, shout out to Brad. It's happening here. It's happening some other places. West Texas is really big in water harvesting. So that's surely an option. And even simple things that you and I could do. If you want to save water, go home and turn off a light. Researchers at Virginia Tech have found that a single 60-watt incandescent bulb that burns 12 hours a day will, at the end of the year, consume as much as 6,300 gallons of water. If you want to save water, turn off a light. Here's another thing you won't think about, or probably haven't thought about. Your food disposal in your kitchen sink. Okay, Val Little of Watercassa here in town, great gal. Shout out to Val. She found that if you use that food disposal 2 minutes a day, by the end of the month, you've used 150 gallons of water just to get rid of food scraps. So stop using your food disposal, except when absolutely essential. So conservation, that's going to help. So far, where are we? Well, there's some silly ideas, but desal can work. Reuse is critical. Conservation remains the low-hanging fruit. Now, in the few minutes I have left, I'd like to talk about 3 things that we could be doing in the United States but are not currently doing. First, I want to take dead aim at the American toilet. Now, probably dinner time is not the right time to do this, but I nonetheless want you to think about this because one of our great presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, said civilized people should do something with the sewage other than put it in the drinking water. Well, of course. That's what we do, right? We get water that's treated to potable levels, and we urinate and defecate in it. Drinking water, we urinate in it and we defecate. And then we send it back to the treatment facility. And like Charlie Brown, they think we're not going to do it again. And Lucy pulls the football away. They treat it, they send it back to us, and we shit in it again. You know, this is crazy. If you think about the potable toilet for more than a nanosecond, you realize it's a system that's outlived its time. It was born of the 19th century when you had cholera epidemics. But now it's a system that wastes water, wastes money, wastes energy, and it even has issues of public health because of all of the drugs that people take, the wonders of the modern pharmaceutical era. Everything you take, your body absorbs some of it, you excrete the rest, you flush it away, and traditional wastewater treatment systems do not remove those residues. Scary stuff. So I want an adult conversation about this. Our water and wastewater, especially infrastructure, is in a terrible state of disrepair. It was built in the 70s and 80s thanks to the feds. No one's putting money in it. We need to replace it. Let's not replace it with the same silly system. Let's have a national commission to talk about what to do with human waste. I mean, already all around the U of A campus, there are hundreds of waterless urinals. They work fine. There are composting and incinerating toilets. Whether they're ready for prime time, I don't know. But surely we Americans have the ingenuity and the creativity to do something better than put sewage in the drinking water. Second, I want to talk about the price of water. Boy, this is a hot button issue. But I start off by saying, gosh, we pay less for water than we do for cell phone service or cable TV. Again, Tucson really has a lot to be proud about. We have a very progressive utility. Tucson our rates are increasing block rates. They have a lifeline rate for people of modest or low income. They are seasonally adjusted, so if you use more water in summer, you're going to pay more for it. We pay our rate structure basically twice for people in Phoenix Bay. And you know what? It matters. Like anything else, supply and demand, price signals, if something costs more, you're going to use less of it. And though we're not surprised by this, all around the United States, communities have different ways of doing things. In towns as large as the capital of California, Sacramento, or Fresno, another big town, there are no water meters. How can that be? People just use what they want. In 1/3 of American cities, there are either flat rates or decreasing block rates. The more you use, the less you pay. The less you pay for the final unit of water. We need to redo this. We need to appreciate that water is a scarce resource and we need to price it appropriately. Now, whenever I start talking this way, especially if I'm on the podium with an elected official, they start looking around nervously, looking for the chief of staff, like, who booked me for this nut? Get me out of here before don't let me be photographed. But, I don't care about any of that. And the reason why I don't care about that is because I have tenure So don't expect the mayor and council and the board of supervisors to get out in front of this. They're good people, but I mean, if you were around in the late 70s when the water rates were raised, you know that's a license to a recall. And it's kind of bizarre if you think about it. The press plays into it. You see these headlines, 25% water rate increase. Yeah, but it's 25% of $6. You know, you can't buy a Starbucks latte for what they want to raise your water rates by. But still, people go marching on City Hall complaining about the water rates. So we have to have an adult conversation about owning up to the fact that water is valuable. And I have to tell you, this is really serious. I say this very sincerely. As I travel around, I meet people, inventors, engineers who have built better water mousetraps. And what is so sad is almost to a person, none of them has a viable business model because the price of water is too darn low. Final point. We're entering an era of water reallocation. So really, it's back to the milkshake glass. This is what we got. And I have, again, a simple-minded idea that if someone wants to put a straw, a new demand, into the public supply, they should be required to persuade someone else to take her straw out of the glass. So it's a demand offset system. It's not no growth, but it is asking growth to pay its own way, finally. Let's get this done right. And the story I'll tell you here has to do with a steel company in Utah, Geneva Steel. It was a company the actual plant was built by the U.S. government during the Second World War. After the war, they peddled it to U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel ran it for several generations. Eventually, though the steel industry in the States came on hard times. Pittsburgh has 100-year-old blast furnaces. Detroit's making automobiles that no one seems to want to buy. The Chinese steel industry is young and aggressive and taking market share. So Geneva Steel tries to cut costs. That doesn't work. They eventually go into bankruptcy. They try to relocate and reorganize their assets. That doesn't work. So they have to finally liquidate all of the things. They have to sell everything they have. But you know, they had a lot of stuff to liquidate. First, they had the land itself. And this was just outside of Provo, Utah, where Brigham Young is. The land brought in $46 million. Then they had an iron ore mine that the mill itself brought in 40. An iron ore mine brought in 10. Pollution reduction credits brought in 4. All told, Geneva Steel netted $100 million. And then they sold the water rights. Yeah, wow. The water rights were worth more than all of these other very substantial assets combined. This is the future of water in the United States, as it should be. What happened in Utah was that the state engineer said, not playing that game anymore, where I give you a permit to drill a well or a right to divert water from a river when I know the river's hammered and the water table's plummeting. No more of that. It's going to be a demand offset system. You bring water to the table, and I give you your permit to grow. And that's what's happened in Utah. So this $102 million, entirely paid for by the development community. Do they care? No. It's just a cost of doing business. You just build it into whatever you're doing. The one answer the development community can't take is the word no. The word yes, but no problem. We got a deal. Now I have to be sober and serious with you, because the water for the future is not coming from steel mills in the West. It's going to come from farmers. And that's because farmers use 80 or more % of every Western state's water. And I finished a study very recently with 2 economists looking at water marketing in 12 Western states. We had 3,200 sales and leases. It covered a 25-year period. It covered twice the annual flow of the Colorado River. A lot of water, 30 million acre-feet. And we found something very, very surprising. Even though most of the sales involved farmer-to-farmer deals. Price of asparagus goes up, the asparagus guy buys some water from the alfalfa grower. Corn's been at $7 or $8 a bushel. The corn growers are buying it from all other farmers. But most of the water wasn't ag to ag. Most of the water was ag to municipal, industrial, and environmental. And yet, farm income held constant for inflation did not go down. Wow. How can this be? Well, for several reasons. One, farmers are very savvy business people. And when faced with an opportunity to make some money, they look around, they say, you know, the land out by the barn, it's all clay soil. Very low yield of bushels per acre. Let's fallow it. Or they might say, you know, that's a lot of money that developers are putting on the table. We could take that $700,000 and line our ditches or move from very inefficient flood irrigation to center pivot irrigation, or even further to drip or micro irrigation. We can grow the same product with less water thanks to the developer's money. And the final thing farmers are doing is they're changing their crop mix. And that's where this comes in. So this is from Yuma, Arizona. It's your classic photograph of farm labor. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a tough way to make a living. Bent over all day long. This is iceberg lettuce harvesting. And it takes about a day for a score of workers to harvest the field. And that head of iceberg that you buy in the Safeway doesn't come that way in the field. In the field, there are all these long lettuce leaves sticking out of it. And every one of those leaves needs to be macheted away before the head is put in the box. That's what's happened here. But another way of looking and thinking about and conceptualizing this photograph is that all of this foreground, all those are the cut lettuce leaves left there. All of that is wasted water. It's water that was used to grow leaves that have no economic value. And what a number of farmers are starting to do is they're starting to move to baby lettuces. And they are all the rage. Some of you are eating them right now on your pizza. In the last 10 or 15 years, they have become the replacement for iceberg lettuce. And this is how they're harvested. You have 4 guys in a tractor trailer rig, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. And this contraption here is like a gigantic electric razor, basically cutting off the lettuce leaves just above the root zone. 4 guys, couple of hours, job done. Next day, you'd send the tractor back down with some fertilizer. No need for pesticides, because the seeds are sown so closely together there are no weeds. Tremendous value added. Anyone tell me the price you paid at Safeway for one of those boxes of baby lettuces lately? Triple washed, right? Farmers got that too. That's why there's been such a change. So at the end of the day, I'm actually quite optimistic. Is there a crisis? You bet there is. But a crisis is a time of opportunity. It's a time when there are still choices to make, paths to choose between and among. What I've tried to sketch out tonight is a portfolio, things we can do. Conservation, you bet. Really, that's where you need to start. Reuse, a wonderful option. Desal, sometimes. And then let's think seriously about replacing toilets with something else. Toilets use 2 trillion gallons of water a year. That ought to get our full attention. And then let's also have a nice adult discussion about pricing water appropriately. And let's understand how reallocation is another part of the solution going forward. Thanks very much.